All right, so good afternoon. And thank everyone and the organizers for the opportunity to present here today on some of the work that we do in communities around what it means to be a resilient neighborhood or resilient communities. And just to talk a little bit about Lansing, well, a little bit on my background. I worked for 19 years as a fishery biologist for the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. And then I went on recently to the city of Charleston as a planner. But during all those years, I also worked first as a volunteer for the organization, which introduced me to a lot of this work in the importance of getting what we do right. And that's mainly what I will be talking about today, about common errors that we make as practitioners, as we make as people who engage communities that are low wealth, right? And the reason I use low wealth in describing the communities that we work in is that they have value. And if we describe them in any other term than that, then we don't see their value and honor the value that they bring to the process. So I will be talking about that today. But a little bit background on the Lansing organization, on the Lowcountry Alliance for Modern Communities. It is an organization that was started back in 2005 by the residents that we work with and advocate with and strategize for improvement in their communities. So those residents actually gave us the mandates that we work on today. And those 4 core areas, they felt that if we can address them, right, if we can establish these, if we can make system changes, that it changes the way that their communities not only are perceived, but how they are valued in the process. And environmental justice is one of those core areas that we focus on. And there was a definition provided, right, and it was from the EPA, and I can't remember who, I think it was, provided from EPA about what environmental justice is. And environmental justice basically, they have fancy, they have a whole paragraph that describes what environmental justice is. But boil it down, right? Communities do not want to be taught to or taught at, right? They want to see action. At the end of the day, they want to see the problems that they are facing solved and addressed. So environmental justice provide that framework in which to get a lot of that done. So basically, environmental justice is the meaningful engagement, right? A lot of people leave that off of the definition of environmental justice, but it is the meaningful engagement of communities and the fair application of laws, rules, policy, funding in communities that are disproportionately impacted. Environmentally, socially, economically, educationally. That these communities are disadvantaged. So Lansing is an organization that works towards addressing those issues and concerns and making systemic changes. We also talked about equality, equity, and justice. And I'm glad Keisha mentioned that justice is part of that equation. Because equality, right, somebody already presented on that, equality gives us all equal access or opportunity. And equity recognizes that there are barriers to some of those opportunities, some of those access, right? And justice removes those barriers. That's what justice is. So we're going to be talking about many of this during this presentation. So this is the Rosemont community here. This is downtown Charleston, Ashley River, and then the Rosemont community is squeezed right here. So Rosemont is bounded by I-26, and many of us know that many traditional African American communities was devastated by urban renewal, right? The siting of roadways, bridges, highways that decimated African American communities. And Rosemont is a perfect example. And you're going to see a map that shows Rosemont prior to the construction of the interstate and what happened to it after the construction of the interstate. But this Rosemont is a community that is bordered by Ashley River and I-26. That is define the boundaries of the current Rosemont today. And if you live in Charleston, right, and you go down King Street Extension, if there was not and it used to be, this was a recent change. There's a sign out there at the street that tells you that Rosemont is this way. But prior to that, you would go right past the Rosemont community and didn't even know that it was a community back there. So that alone created this sense of isolation for Rosemont. Isolation from the rest of the city of Charleston. And they felt, and still till this day, that sentiment is expressed from the communities. Like Rosemont, many of the communities in the neck area, is the section of Charleston and North Charleston that connects the two. So you have the city of Charleston, and you have the city of North Charleston. And the neck connects the city of Charleston and the city of North Charleston. And the communities that we work in is found in the neck area of both Charleston and North Charleston. And this area historically has been the area where industrial operations have been. So fertilizer plants, phosphate plants, which have left a legacy pollution in many of these communities. Most of the residents in these neighborhoods, they were developed and came about because of the need to provide housing to the workers that worked in the plants. So the neighborhoods like Rosemont, neighborhood like Silver Hill, Union Heights, Chicora, Cherokee, all of these communities came about because of the need to provide housing to the workers in the fertilizer and phosphorus plants. So before I start, I just wanted to ground us in some of the statements when we ask communities, what does Rosemont mean to you, right? And I think that this is important for us when we go into communities, that we understand how they see their space and their place, how they value the place that they are connected to, right? Because that's going to help us to be able to equally value how they see their space and their place. So I just highlighted two of them, right? One person said, this always have been home. And I'm always going to care about what happens, right? Although we may not see them actively involved in community participation meetings, right? That's held at City Hall, that's held in other places, right? That doesn't mean that they do not care about the space that they are a part of, right? Maybe the problem is us. Why aren't we holding the meetings in their neighborhoods, right? Sometimes we have to go to them to solicit their input in their participation in the process and not expect for them to come to us, right? And in many instances, we expect for them to come to us. And where we hold meetings during the time of day that is inconvenient to them. We hold it in places that is not accessible to them, right? It's not along a bus route. Or even if they can come, they have children, right? So we don't offer daycare, et cetera, to make it convenient for people who have, if we value their input, right? We have to make it conducive for them to fully participate. Another individual said, I just love it because it's in the center of everything. It takes just a matter of minutes to get anywhere that you need, really. So the convenience is great, right? That's a blessing and it's a curse, right? Because not only do they see that their community is convenient and centrally located, but other folk do too, which puts more pressure on these communities. And it talk about resilience here. It's all is about resilience for communities. So just to ground us a little bit in some of the truth of some of the residents of Rosemont. So here's a split. I pulled this off the Charleston's equity story map that Chloe Stuber played a huge part in having that facilitated and created so that we can see some of the historical impacts that we have had as planners, that we have had as transportation professionals, how we have participated in this. So what you see here on in this picture is the Rosemont before the interstate. And this is all of Rosemont. And listening to the stories that the communities tell about Rosemont, that this section of Rosemont, right, was always black. That's where the black community lived of Rosemont. And they said that the white community always lived on this section of Rosemont. This right here was the school. And the black children of this area could not go to that school. Right. When the highway came through, it devastated this portion of Rosemont. The white folks left, the school remained, and they allowed the black children to go to the school. But the school had asbestos, it had lead, environmental harms. This is Rosemont after I-26. And you can see what we mean about Rosemont feeling isolated. Now Rosemont not only have I-26, but it has a sound wall that runs along the interstate. That has contributed to some additional flooding that the community is experiencing. They recently had a resurfacing of their streets, which contributed to flooding in Rosemont because the infrastructure was not improved. Right, and you will see in some of the other pictures that I will be sharing about some of the infrastructure. But this is just showing you the impact of climate change. We see, this is the Rosemont community here, and we see that as sea level rises, that water inundates into the internal parts of Rosemont. Remember now, this is Rosemont here. So this is a higher portion of Rosemont, but the rest of it is experiencing inundation of water. These are just some pictures here that I want to talk to you about. So Keisha mentioned about the tour that we did with A.J. Strong. This picture here is a pipe. Until this day, we cannot figure out what this pipe is for. We have reached out to all types of agencies to figure this out. And no one can tell us what this pipe is. And the community is concerned. You see all this trash, and this is legacy pollution. We have no idea what that is. What if we have a major hurricane and that pipe is ruptured? What is the community being exposed to? Here's the sound wall. This is Dorset Avenue here. So Rosemont has two ways in and out. It has Dorset Avenue that allows it to get back to King Street Extension if it goes this way, and then if they go along P Street, and then I can't remember, Alston Avenue. It leads to the back end of Rosemont where the industrial operations are. What if Rosemont had an industrial accident that shuts off Alston Avenue, where there is no ability to use that exit to get out of Rosemont. And it is only one way to get out of Rosemont. How many lives are going to be lost from a chemical exposure? What if they have a derailment of trains because the train, to get out of Rosemont, they have to, from Dorsia, they have to cross a train track. What if there's a train derailment of some sort that leaks chemicals? How are the residents are going to be, what are they going to be exposed to, and how are they going to? We have walked Rosemont on several occasions, and we have looked for how many stormwater drains exist in Rosemont. And on Dorsia Avenue, we can only count 2. And you're seeing one of them right here. The other one is in the grass over here. So this area floods. The sound wall, right? And this is before they made improvements. This no longer exists, right? They cleared this out a little bit. They put in some additional infrastructure improvements to kind of handle some of the storm water. But before that, before the community really started making a lot of noise around that this wall was contributing to increased flooding that they were experiencing, they could get no one to take care of this area. Right? This sound wall contributes to the flooding in that Rosemont is experiencing. And we know that because we had a College of Charleston student fly a drone over the community and reassess the elevations in Rosemont, and her project showed that yes, the elevation has changed because of the installation of the sound wall that contributes to flooding in Rosemont. This picture here and here are the results of one day of continuous rain in Rosemont. This is the area before the sound wall. So this is the same area. These 2 areas here, same area. And you can see that the residents know where to park their cars. Right? They know where the high ground is. Why do they know where the high ground is? Because this is not their first rodeo with that particular area flooding. Right? So they know exactly where to park their cars at to avoid their cars from being flooded. This is that same area right across the street, right here, where you see a wading bird, right there in the middle. We sent this picture to the city of Charleston, the mayor. Actually, we put it in a letter to the mayor, Mayor Teckenberg. And I believe after that, I think Dale, he reached out to you, and he asked you to work with Rosemont on some of these issues and concerns. And because Rosemont was able to document the impacts they were having from flooding, we've now been able to partner with the city. The city has brought a significant amount of resources to the table. We have been able to leverage those resources to bring additional funding to help Rosemont to begin to plan their own community-based, community-led resiliency plan that would be specific to Rosemont. Now, I can tell you that since Rosemont's existence, they have never participated in a community planning process before. All right, so this is going to be a challenging experience for us. Not only for the people, for the practitioners, but it's going to be challenging for the communities as well. So one of the things that we have to do when we do this work, and we're working in low wealth communities, communities that are disproportionately impacted, that we have to be patient, right? This kind of work does not work on a timeline. So just because our grants require a certain thing to get done at a certain specific time, just know that that may not be the case when you start working in communities. The other thing that's going to be challenging to us as we do this work is that The residents themselves are experts. Right? And a lot of times we don't see them as experts. But they are. And one of the things that we have to do a better job at doing is that while we are extracting from them, because if we are extracting from them, when we call them to meetings and we want them to sit on boards and committees and inform our research and our work, it is extractive. Right? Every last one of us are being paid to be here, except for community folk. So the system change that we need to do is pay those folks, pay those community people that we say are experts and we need them to inform our work, pay them. Right? We need to hire them as part of our grants to be consultants, because we could not do the work without them. Right? So that's a mindset change, it's a system change. It's going to be hard. But in order to do this work right, that is what is required. Value. Right? Because at the end of the day, that's all the community wants. Is they want to be valued. They want to be felt like they're part of, right? Not us coming to them with a plan and say, what you think about this plan? And give us your input about what this great idea we have. That they didn't involve them, right? We mentioned environmental justice is the meaningful engagement. Meaning that those communities are engaged in a meaningful way that involves them not only in the participation in the project, but they are involved in the planning, they are involved in the evaluation, all the way through. And we have to start incorporating in our grants monies to pay them and compensate them as experts, because that is exactly what they are. They are experts. None of us live this. I cannot tell you what it means to have my front yard floods every time it rains. I don't know what that feels like, or not being able to access my car because I have to park it on a high ground across from my yard. They know what that feels like in that experience. So we need to pay them accordingly, right? And compensate them for that. We went back into the community, and after we did this work with them on what is called photo voice, right? Photo voice is a process in which, because communities want to feel empowered, right? They already have power. How can we tap into, right, Keisha mentioned capacity. How can we tap into that already existing power, the capacity that they have, and use it to advocate for their best interests, right? And these were just some, after we initially asked them, before we got involved with them with the Photo Voice project, right? This was a student project too. So a student wrote her capstone, well, actually her thesis. She wrote her thesis off of this work with Engage in Rosemont about their feelings about flooding in their communities. Because they were told, right, the residents were told, it doesn't flood in Rosemont. Rosemont is high enough, right, that it doesn't flood. And the community knew that that was not true because they would experience it, right? And they had to document. And I was telling somebody earlier, it is shameful that communities have to document their harm to justify to other folk that they are environmentally challenged. They shouldn't have to do that. Right? Again, valuing the voices of those who live that experience. If they say it's flooding, it's flooding. So these are just some of the other comments, right, after we began to work with Rosemont and document their environmental challenges in their communities. One of them said that they feel like we are a forgotten community. Right? And drilling down on that, why do you feel like you are a forgotten community? Right? And the response was, well, we see investments in other communities, but no investment here. Why is Rosemont allowed to flood when other communities are getting infrastructure improvement or getting other types of solutions that prevents flooding, or at least they perceived, right? Preventing flooding in other communities, right? So that was a feeling that they felt. Another one said, another individual said, it's one of those communities that's culturally underserved and the disparities is visible, right? And they said it is visible in housing, it is visible in the economics, right? So they're speaking to the aesthetics of a community. And we can travel across this country and we know when we are in a low wealth community and when we are in an affluent community. Just by the aesthetics, just by the amenities. Communities that have grocery stores, sidewalks, green spaces, or affluent communities. Communities that lack sidewalks, do not have green spaces, live 2 miles away from a grocery store, have convenience stores on every corner, liquor stores on every corner, Family Dollar, Dollar General, low wealth communities. So they are speaking to the aesthetics, right? All resilience, right? So a community that is resilient goes beyond just flooding or climate change. But a community becomes more resilient when their housing is attainable, when their housing is resilient, when their housing is energy efficient. I heard someone mention that, right? When they have access to economic mobility, when they have access to educational attainment that allows them to have that economic mobility, and when they have environments that is conducive for them to raise healthy families. Right? Those are resilient communities, going past water, right? Those typical topics that we talk about when we talk about climate change. Melting ice caps, polar bears, rain. But resilience is getting back to what makes people, right, more resilient. So that challenged us, right, to have different conversations about climate change. Different conversations of what it means to be a resilient community. Right? So how we discuss and talk about climate change and resilient community must include those social, economic characteristics that makes up communities. We cannot do resilient work without addressing housing, without addressing economics, without addressing education. Right? Because at the end of the day, the residents that we work with, they want to know how their life, how their quality of life is going to be improved. Right? So, but although we're there to talk about climate change or resilience, we also have to recognize that we have to talk about housing, we have to talk about economics, and we have to talk about education, because that's top of mind for them. And we're not going to get across to them the importance of why resiliency matters to them if we're not addressing those kind of everyday concerns that they have. How am I going to pay for medicine? Right? If I have to choose between medicine and food on my table. Keisha mentioned E.J. Strong. These are the partners that we work. We cannot do this work without those partners. DHEC, EPA, Clemson, University of South Carolina, the City of Charleston, CCRAP, right? CCRAP is the Charleston Community Research to Action Board. And it is an organization that grew out really out of Lampsey's work. But it functions as a community advisory board that filters research projects because, look, communities that we work in have been exploited by the research community. So the communities had to develop a process in which they could filter even research that comes into their communities. So now they are leading research in their communities and asking questions about how can we address flooding and what can be done from a nature-based perspective to begin to address flooding, because they know that we cannot engineer ourselves from the impacts of climate change. Right? We're going to have to prevent destruction of sensitive habitats, allowing water to reclaim spaces that it always have claimed, and stop fighting water but work with water. Those are solutions, right? And these are just some examples here of some of the efforts, or some of the vision that the communities, right? All of these renderings that you see came from community-focused, community-led design, charrettes. Where they led the conversations and the professionals hung back, right? And put their skill sets to design the renderings, but it was the community conversations that drove. Not the other way around. We come with the plan, right? We come with our ideas of what we think is going to be their solutions. So I think that's the last. Oh, let me talk about this here. This one, I think this is the last one here. Okay. So this is Lampsey's theory of change, or our approach to community engagement, right? What we say is that we engage communities in a meaningful way to educate, right? And this is a shared, right? It's a co-learning opportunity, and so it goes both ways. That's why it's not linear. It is secular in kind of nature, right? So we are learning from them, they are learning from us, and it's a pull, right? It's a give and take and a pull, right? So we engage communities in meaningful ways to not only educate ourselves, but educate them on issues and concerns that they identify. Not what we identify, what they identify. And then we work to empower so that they become the advocates. Because at the end of the day, what I tell folk is that I do not want to be doing this 25 years from now. I want to leave solutions, skill sets, whatever it takes to empower communities to become the advocates. And we're just there to provide technical support and whatever is necessary, and connections and resources, what is necessary for them to get the work done. But that is not an easy process, right? Because this is complicated. You have competing interests. You have leadership dynamics. You have personalities that you have to deal with, right? So it's always challenging in this work. So I'm gonna leave it there.